You have a type. Be honest. You do. And if you have ever looked back at your last few relationships, you might have noticed something unsettling. They rhyme. Same kind of person, same kind of ending, same argument in a slightly different costume. You swear you'll pick differently next time. And then you meet someone new, feel that instant pull, that we just click magic, and walk straight into the exact same wall. Here's the uncomfortable truth. That magnetic pull you trust so much, it isn't your wisdom guiding you toward the right person. It might be an ancient shortcut in your brain steering you toward the familiar one. And familiar is not the same thing as good. Your heart isn't a compass. It's more of a very confident intern who keeps booking the same terrible hotel. We treat that spark of attraction like a verdict, like some deep part of us has scanned this stranger and confirmed they're the one. So when it goes wrong, we're baffled. How did something that felt so certain be so off? But attraction was never built to find you a healthy 60-year partnership. It was built by evolution for a much older, blunter job, and it uses shortcuts that made sense on the savannah and quietly sabotage you on a dating app. To see why you keep picking the same person, we'll untangle 5 things. The opposites attract lie. The invisible template your childhood installed, why the wrong person can feel like fireworks while the right one feels boring, why your judgment switches off at the worst moment, and at the end, what actually breaks the cycle. Let's go. Let's kill the biggest myth first, because it poisons everything. You've been told opposites attract. They don't. In 2023, researchers at the University of Colorado ran one of the largest analyses of couples ever done, millions of pairs, across more than a century, looking at over 130 different traits. The finding was almost embarrassingly one-sided. For somewhere between 82 and 89% of traits, partners were more similar than random chance. Political views, education, drinking habits, even age of first relationship, birds of a feather. Opposites attracting showed up for only about 3% of traits, barely. And some of those similarities are strikingly strong. Take political values. On a scale where 0 means no connection at all and 1 means couples always match, political alignment scored around 0.58. That's not a faint tendency. That's your brain quietly filtering for people like me before you've consciously decided anything. Now, one honest caution the researchers themselves raised. This line of work has an ugly history. It was once hijacked by the eugenics movement, so nobody's saying similarity is some moral ideal. It's just what the data on actual couples shows. Which means, wow, we have so much in common is less a happy coincidence. And more, the entire mechanism, working exactly as designed. But here's the thing, similarity by itself is harmless, even nice. Similar people tend to argue less about the big stuff and build stable lives. So if we're drawn to the similar, and similar is stable, why does anyone end up with the wrong person at all? The answer isn't in what happened to you last year. It's in what happened to you at age 4. Your brain has one overriding bias running underneath almost everything. It prefers the familiar. There's a well-documented effect in psychology. The more you encounter something, the more you tend to like it, purely from repetition. No reason required. Now apply that to love. In the 1980s, psychologists Cindy Hazen and Philip Shaver proposed something that reshaped how we understand relationships, that romantic love is, underneath, an attachment process, running on the very same system that once bonded you to a caregiver as a helpless infant. The idea is that as a child, the emotional temperature you grew up in, how affection was shown, whether love felt steady or uncertain, how conflict sounded, quietly became your working definition of what love is, not what's healthy, what's familiar. And your brain, forever chasing the familiar, learns to read that specific flavor as home. So if the person who's kind, calm, and consistently available feels a little flat, while the one who's distant and hot and cold feels electric, that's often not chemistry spotting quality. That's your nervous system recognizing a pattern it was trained on and mistaking recognition for rightness. Your brain walks into a familiar disaster and goes, "Ah, smells like home." But this raises a sharper question. If we just liked the familiar, that would be mild. It wouldn't explain the intensity, why the wrong person doesn't feel boring, but like the most exciting thing that's ever happened to you. For that, you need to know your attachment style. Hazan and Shaver found that adults tend to fall into roughly 3 patterns. Most people, somewhere over half, are secure, comfortable with closeness, able to trust and depend on a partner without panic. But a large chunk are insecure in one of 2 ways. Anxious people crave closeness intensely and live in low-grade fear their partner doesn't really love them. Avoidant people want love too, but feel smothered by closeness and pull away to protect their independence. Now here's the trap that ruins so many smart people. Anxious and avoidant are magnetically drawn to each other, and it feels incredible at first. The avoidant person's distance triggers the anxious person's alarm, which makes them chase harder, which makes the avoidant person retreat, which makes the anxious person chase even harder, round and round. And your brain reads that agonizing loop as passion. Why? Because of one of the most powerful principles in all of psychology, unpredictable reward is more addictive than reliable reward. A partner who's warm one day and cold the next isn't giving you love, they're giving you a slot machine. The occasional hit of affection, arriving randomly, lights up your reward system harder than steady affection ever could. It's the exact same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You're not in love. You're just hooked on the loading screen. So the spark you chase can be, quite literally, the feeling of your alarm system going off, which is terrifying because the beginning is exactly when you're supposed to be judging this person clearly. And that's the next problem, because right then, your judgment is chemically compromised. Remember what early attraction actually is under the hood. A flood of dopamine and norepinephrine, with serotonin dropping in a way that looks a lot like obsessive thinking. This is the same reward chemistry involved in cravings. And that cocktail does something specific and dangerous. It narrows your focus onto the reward and quietly dims your ability to evaluate it critically. This is the neurological basis of the phrase, "love is blind." It isn't poetry. Early infatuation genuinely biases you toward noticing everything wonderful about someone and explaining away everything alarming. So stack the problems up. You're drawn to the familiar. The familiar might be an unhealthy pattern from childhood. The unpredictability of it feels like passion instead of anxiety. And on top of all that, the chemistry has switched off the part of you that could notice any of this. By the time it cools, a few years later, you can suddenly see everything that was there the whole time. Falling in love is the only situation where your brain hands you a blindfold and calls it a gift. But plenty of people do see the red flags clearly and choose the person anyway. Which points at the deepest problem of all, the very idea of having a type. Here's the reframe that changes everything. A type feels like self-knowledge, like you've figured out what you like. But a type is really just a shortcut your brain built to make a huge, complicated decision fast. And shortcuts optimize for speed, not accuracy. The Savannah logic makes sense. Our ancestors couldn't run months of careful compatibility testing. Fast pattern matching. This feels familiar and safe, go. Was good enough to reproduce, which is all evolution ever cared about. It never cared whether you'd be happy at year 20. It just needed you to pair up and raise a child past the dangerous years. So your type isn't your taste. It's an ancient autocomplete, trained partly on your earliest experiences, firing before your conscious mind gets a say, and it keeps suggesting the same word because that's literally what autocomplete does. Trust the spark to start the fire. Do not let it choose the house. Which finally raises the only question that actually matters. If the pull is this rigged, how does anyone break the cycle? Here's the good news, and it's bigger than it sounds. The people who escape this pattern almost never do it by finding a better type. They do it by changing their relationship to the spark itself. Three things tend to do it. First, they stop treating instant intensity as a verdict and start treating it as a first impression. Useful data from a fast, ancient, not very wise part of the brain to be checked, not obeyed. Second, they learn that if a calm, steady, available person feels boring, that boredom might not be a lack of chemistry. It might be a nervous system so used to chaos that peace feels like nothing is happening. To a dysregulated system, safe can register as dull until it recalibrates. And third, they watch behavior over time instead of trusting the feeling in week 2, because character shows up in months, not in sparks. None of that means killing romance. It means putting a slightly wiser, slower voice on the committee, the one your ancestors never had the luxury of listening to. The spark gets a vote. It does not get to be the judge, the jury, and the moving company. Step back, and the whole thing looks less like a personal curse and more like old software running on modern hardware. You're using a mate detection system tuned for small bands and fast decisions in a world of 8 billion strangers and infinite choice. Of course, it defaults to the familiar. Of course, it can mistake an anxiety loop for passion. Of course, it dims your judgment to push you toward pairing up. Of course, it keeps suggesting the same face. The pull toward the wrong person isn't proof that you're broken or doomed to repeat yourself. It's proof that the loudest, fastest voice in the room was never the wise one. And the moment you know that, you get something your ancestors never had, the option to overrule it. So the next time you feel that instant, magnetic certainty about someone that I just know, treat it gently, but don't obey it. That feeling isn't a scan of their soul. It's an ancient shortcut recognizing something familiar and calling it fate. Sometimes it's even your alarm system, dressed up as butterflies. Familiar got your ancestors to reproduce. It won't necessarily get you to happy. The spark is real. It's just not the judge. It never was. And here's the thing that pull leads to next. Once two of these fast ancient systems bond, even beautifully, a different ancient program can quietly switch on and start pulling one partner towards someone else. Why good, loving people cheat, and why it usually has nothing to do with being a bad person is the next one.